You never forget the sound of betrayal. It doesn't come with thunder or warning bells. It comes sharp, sudden, like glass shattering inside your chest. That morning started like any other. Quiet, ordinary, deceptively safe. I was in the kitchen, swirling a spoon through my coffee, half listening to the radio. The sunlight spilled across the counter in golden streaks. I had just gotten back from the store with fresh bread and almond milk, Tessa's favorite. I remember humming an old tune, thinking about nothing important. Life felt steady, normal. But in the span of 7 words, everything I thought I knew collapsed. The door creaked open. I didn't even turn around at first. I figured it was Tessa's sister, Alina, dropping by like she always did, loud, intrusive, acting like our home was her second apartment. She had a way of barging in without knocking, without asking, barely meeting my eyes as if I was just furniture in the house. Usually, I ignored her for the sake of peace. But that morning, something in her steps was different, hesitant, charged. Behind her came Tessa, my wife. But her face, God, her face, looked like someone had told her the world was ending. I turned, coffee mug in hand, ready to joke, to ask if everything was okay. And then Alina said it. Adrian got me pregnant. 7 words. 7 bullets. For a second, the air went still. I didn't even drop the mug. I froze, waiting for someone to laugh, to say it was a sick joke. But no one did. Tessa's eyes, the same eyes that once searched for me in a crowd, that once lit up when I walked into a room, those eyes turned into fire. Her hand shot across my face with such force that my head snapped to the side. The mug shattered on the tile. The sting of her slap was nothing compared to the burn of her betrayal. Tessa! I tried, but her silence was louder than any scream. And then came her brothers. Jared and Marco. Built like linebackers, always itching for a fight. They must have been waiting outside, because they stormed in without hesitation, without a single question. Hands like vices clamped on my arms, dragging me toward the door as if I were trash to be thrown out. Get your hands off me, I muttered, but the words came out weak, stunned. The world blurred. My bare feet scraped against the floor. My shirt twisted in their fists. Outside, the autumn air slapped colder than Tessa's hand. And then, a punch to my stomach. A shove against the fence. Stars burst behind my eyes. Neighbors peeked from windows. Someone across the street lifted a phone, filming, their lens like a rifle aimed at me. And there I was, gasping, stumbling, branded guilty without trial. You sick freak, Jared spat, his voice filled with venom that didn't belong to him but was handed to him like a script. Marco shoved me again, his face red with disgust. And Tessa. She stood in the doorway, arms crossed, wedding ring glinting in the sun like a cruel reminder. She didn't move, didn't blink, didn't ask. She looked at me like I was already dead to her. That was the moment I understood. I wasn't her husband anymore. I wasn't a man with a name, with a history, with years of love and memories. I was a villain in their story, a monster her sister created with a single sentence. I stumbled to the street, every nerve screaming, every breath heavy. My phone buzzed non-stop. Messages, missed calls, pings from people I hadn't spoken to in months. Rumors spread faster than fire, and I could feel the smoke choking me already. I looked back once. Tessa's silhouette in the doorway. Her silence louder than all the accusations combined. I turned away. Not because I wanted to, but because there was nothing left to turn back for. I didn't pack that night. I didn't even argue. I just walked back inside with a split lip and bruised ribs, grabbed a duffel bag, and shoved in whatever my hands touched first. A few shirts, old jeans, my toothbrush, a notebook I barely used. The house was silent except for the crunch of glass under my shoes from the shattered coffee mug. I glanced at it once, the mug Tessa and I bought together at a flea market on our first trip as a couple. I left the shards where they were. Upstairs, I heard her moving around. Drawers slamming. A door locking. She didn't come down. She didn't call my name. And I didn't bother saying goodbye. What was the point? They'd already buried me in their minds. 2 days later, I sat hunched in the corner of a library computer station, hoodie pulled low, ribs wrapped tight under my shirt. I wasn't looking for an escape plan. I was just trying to cancel a few subscriptions, close my accounts, pretend I still had control over something. That's when the email came. Notice of administrative leave. I read it 3 times, each word stabbing deeper. My company was cutting ties, pending investigation of allegations. Allegations. I hadn't spoken to anyone. I hadn't told a soul. But the lie had grown legs. Confused, I logged into social media. I almost never used it, but curiosity clawed at me. And there it was. A thread. Not my name, but close enough for anyone to connect the dots. Married man. Sister-in-law. Pregnancy. Betrayal. Justice. No evidence. No context. Just a story people were eager to believe. Comments flooded in. Men like this are everywhere. Trash. She's so brave for speaking out. Hope he rots in jail. Rot in jail? There wasn't even a police report. But proof didn't matter when the lie was juicier than the truth. By day 3, I was out of my apartment. My landlord texted, "Sorry, man. Tenants are uncomfortable. Need you gone." I typed back, "No problem. I'll be out today." Because I understood something now. Being accused of something vile doesn't just ruin your reputation. It makes you radioactive. No one wants to stand too close, afraid they'll catch the fallout. Even the bakery lady, Mrs. Ingram, who used to greet me every morning with a smile, looked me dead in the eye and muttered, "We're closed today," while 3 people sipped coffee behind me. And that's when the whispers began. "That's him. Disgusting. Can you believe what he did?" I hadn't done anything. But lies don't need air to breathe. They only need willing mouths to repeat them. My phone buzzed constantly at first. Tessa had blocked me. Her mother too. Our friends vanished from group chats like I had never existed. People I once carried furniture for, cooked dinner with, laughed alongside, they all vanished. The last straw came one evening when an old college friend called me. Someone who had known me for a decade. His voice was cautious, shaky. "Hey, man. I don't want to pry, but, did you really?" I hung up before he could finish. If 10 years of friendship wasn't enough to earn trust, then nothing was. That night, I sat in a cheap motel, staring at the ceiling fan as it clicked in broken circles. I thought about all the times I had gone out of my way for Alina, helping her move, fixing her shelves, driving her across town when her car broke down. And now, she was the one rewriting my entire existence with a single lie. But what gnawed at me most wasn't her betrayal. It was Tessa's silence. The woman I loved, the woman who had whispered promises in the dark, didn't even ask me if it was true. She saw me. She knew me. And she still chose to believe her sister over me. That silence was worse than the slap. Worse than the beating. Worse than the whispers online. Because silence meant she never really knew me at all. And in that motel room, with my last dollars dwindling, I realized something chilling. If I stayed, I'd drown under the weight of a lie I couldn't fight. If I left, at least I'd have a chance to breathe. So I opened my notebook. On the first page, in shaky handwriting, I wrote one sentence. You didn't even ask. Then I closed it, shoved it back in my bag, and began planning how to disappear. The decision to disappear didn't come with fireworks. It came quietly, like a whisper in the back of my head that grew louder with every empty glance from strangers, every ignored call, every locked door. I sold what little I had left. My laptop, my watch, the old guitar gathering dust in the corner. Each item felt like peeling away a layer of myself until nothing remained but the bare bones of survival. My bank account was nearly empty. The company froze my severance, pending review, which meant I had nothing but a few hundred in cash. The motel manager knocked on my door the morning rent was due. She didn't even look at me when she said, "Time's up." So I walked out with a duffel bag, a cracked phone, and a heart that felt like it had been scraped hollow. The travel agency sat between a pawn shop and a laundromat, a place most people passed without noticing. A rusted bell above the door jingled when I stepped inside. Behind the counter, a young woman barely looked up from her crossword puzzle. "Where to?" she asked. I stared at the map pinned behind her, little colored lines stretching across oceans and continents. So many places, all of them strangers. "Anywhere but here," I muttered. She laughed like I was joking, but when she met my eyes, her smile faltered. Without another word, she printed a ticket. One way. No return. By evening, I was on a bus heading toward a town whose name I couldn't even pronounce. The duffel bag sat heavy on my lap. Inside, 2 shirts, a pair of boots, my toothbrush, and the notebook with that one sentence scribbled in shaky ink. You didn't even ask. I stared out the window as the city lights melted into fields, fields into forests, forests into coastline. The further we drove, the more I felt myself unraveling. Adrian, the husband, the dependable one, the man who built a life around trust, was gone. What remained was someone unrecognizable. The bus driver pulled into a gravel lot and announced, "Last stop." That was fine by me. The town was small, the kind of place where the buildings leaned with age and the paint peeled under salty air. The harbor stretched out like a sleeping dog, fishing boats tethered loosely, rocking against the tide. It smelled of brine and smoke and something faintly metallic, like rust. I walked into the only inn in sight, duffel bag over my shoulder. The woman behind the desk looked me up and down. "Cash only," she said flatly. I handed over 2 weeks' worth of rent. "Do you know if anyone's hiring?" I asked. "Depends what kind of help," she said. "Anything that keeps me moving." She tilted her head toward the harbor. "Try Ben. Old man with the nets. Always needs hands." And just like that, my new life began. Ben didn't ask questions. He just handed me a pair of gloves and pointed at a pile of fishing nets that reeked of salt and rot. I worked until my back screamed and my fingers blistered. For the first time in weeks, no one whispered when I walked by. No one stared like I was radioactive. I was just a man with gloves and a job. That night, I collapsed on the thin mattress in my rented room. The walls were stained with years of smoke, the ceiling cracked, the air damp. But for once, I slept. The next morning, I woke before dawn. My ribs still ached, my hands were raw, but the silence felt different. Not hostile. Not accusatory. Just silence. I went back to the docks. Worked until my arms shook. Ate a piece of bread in the corner of the harbor. And when I returned to my room, I opened the notebook again. This time, I wrote more than one sentence. Just fragments. Thoughts. A word here, a phrase there. Pieces of myself I was afraid to forget. Nobody here knew Adrian. Nobody here cared about the lie that destroyed me. They only knew the man who showed up to work, paid cash for his room, and kept his head down. And for the first time, I wondered, maybe disappearing wasn't running away. Maybe it was the only way to stay alive. Names are just handles we give to our ghosts. The first time someone in that town called me by the wrong one, I didn't correct them. I was hauling a coil of wet rope across the dock when Ben cupped a hand to his ear and grunted, "Miles, toss it here." Miles. It landed in my chest like a soft stone. I caught the rope, nodded, and kept moving. No lightning struck. No alarms blared. The world didn't shout that I was an imposter. It just accepted the sound. At the inn that night, the owner, Celia, slid my change across the counter and said, "Keep it, Miles. You've been helping with the busted stare. Consider it your rent discount." She had a cigarette voice and eyes that saw more than they asked. For a second, I wondered if she knew I wasn't who I said I was. Then she popped a peppermint into her mouth and turned the radio up. Acceptance or indifference. In that moment, they felt like the same gentle thing. My days found a rhythm. Wake before the gulls, run until my lungs burned, work the docks until my palms went numb, eat bread that tasted of wind and salt, fall asleep to the creak of old wood. Pain became a metronome. Predictable. Owned. If I hurt, it was because I had lifted, pulled, carried, because I had chosen to move. Not because someone else decided I deserved it. Word spread in the only way that matters in a small place. Not through rumors, but through chores. A last-minute hand needed for a delivery. A tarp to be nailed down before the rain. A door that wouldn't close because the hinges rotted. "Ask Miles," people said. "He's quick." Quick didn't mean gifted. It meant I didn't argue and I didn't ask for more than a fair cash rate. One afternoon the library posted a handwritten sign, "Internet down, again." The thought should have comforted me, a blessing against the digital wildfire that had burned my name to ash. But the word again made my stomach knot. For me, the internet was a predator lurking just offshore. If it stayed down forever, I wouldn't mourn. "Hey, you're the new guy," a voice said behind me. I turned. A woman in her mid-30s, hair tied back with a pencil, stood in the doorway of the shop next to the library. The window said June's, ODDS, ENDS, and Wild Ideas. Inside, mismatched mugs, handmade candles, seashell picture frames, a cardboard rocket ship big enough for a child to disappear into. "I'm June," she said, sticking out a paint-flecked hand. "Everyone says you fix things." "Some things," I said. "My website is a disaster," she sighed. "And my nephew swears people won't come if they can't click pretty pictures first." She grimaced like the word click tasted sour. "You do computers?" "I used to," I said, the truth sliding out before I could sand it down. She didn't ask used to where. Or for who. She just angled her head toward the back. "I pay in cash. And coffee. The good kind. Not the tar Celia makes." I followed her into an office that was really a broom closet with dreams, a second-hand laptop, a stack of invoices weighted by a shell, a bulletin board full of to-dos pinned with optimism. The site was a puzzle with missing pieces, and I remembered how to move through code like a person walking an old neighborhood in the dark. Slower than before, but sure-footed. June hovered, narrating the way people narrate when they're really talking to themselves. I tried to do it myself. Watched 3 tutorials. Cried during the third one. "Don't judge me." "I won't," I said. "You just did," she said, then laughed at herself. "Sorry. It's been a week." "What happened?" She waved it away. Supply shipment delayed. A seagull stole a customer's scone. My nephew glued googly eyes on 37 candles last night. I could go on. We worked for 2 hours. I added alt text to images, tightened up the layout, made it so the page didn't collapse on a phone screen like a folding chair. She made coffee and told stories about customers with names like Pike and Swan and Toe, short for Tony, long story, very defensive about it. When I pushed the last change live, the site actually breathed. June clicked around with reverent concentration, then looked at me like I had cheated at magic. You saved my shop. I arranged boxes, I said. You filled them. Still counts. She reached across the desk and set a cookie wrapped in wax paper in front of me. Take this. Don't argue. I didn't. The cookie tasted like vanilla and a childhood I couldn't touch anymore. See you, Miles, she said as I left. Don't vanish. The door chimed behind me and the word vanish caught in my throat. I walked to the harbor to shake it loose. That evening, Ben sat on an overturned crate, running a knife along a line with the care of a surgeon. You're steady, he said without looking up. For Ben, that was a poem. Steady's all I've got, I said. He sniffed. Steady's what keeps boats from sinking. We worked in companionable silence, the kind that doesn't demand a history. Gulls bickered over a scrap of something that used to be alive. A boy on the pier threw a line badly, then worse, then better. Your walk's smoothing out, Ben added. Ribs are healing, I said. He didn't ask from what. He just nodded like ribs were weather. Sometimes they break, sometimes they mend. Days layered into something like a life. People learned my coffee order. They stopped calling me new guy and started saying Miles the way you say Tuesday. Not with affection, exactly, but with familiarity and the relief of knowing where it fits on the calendar. I said hello to the man who fixed nets on his porch and he nodded back like I had always been there, just a few steps to the left of where he remembered. And then the first crack appeared. I was leaving the grocer, a place that smelled like apples and bleach, when a car I didn't recognize eased to the curb. New, shiny, the kind of glitter that doesn't belong anywhere near working docks. The driver's window rolled down. A woman I'd never seen lifted her phone like a periscope and, for one bright, glassy second, framed me in her screen. I turned away. The car idled. The lens followed. Then she lowered it, smiled, polite, empty, and drove off. Maybe she was a tourist. Maybe she liked my shirt. Maybe I was a ghost seeing cameras in every shadow. But the chill that ran down my back didn't care for maybe. I took the long way to the inn. Celia was stacking a crate of bottled water. You look like you saw a tax auditor, she said. Just cold, I lied. She set a key on the counter. Your window sticks. I put you in 6 for a few nights. Heat's better. Thank you. She lit a peppermint between her teeth and watched it catch the light. You ever gonna get mail, Miles? I shook my head. No one writes. Lucky, she said. Only things I get are bills and my cousin's chain letters about cucumbers curing sciatica. In my new room, the radiator clanked like it was remembering how to be warm. I sat on the floor and opened the notebook. The first page still held the original sentence. You didn't even ask. Below it I added, I'm someone else now. Or I am no one. Maybe both are safer. A knock rattled the thin door. I flinched. Yeah. It's me, June called. Don't freak out. I opened the door and she blew in with the weather. I brought you soup. And a favor to ask. But mostly soup. What's the favor? There's a community market on Saturday. I signed up for a booth and then remembered I'm one person. Will you help me haul tables? And, if you're feeling wild, smile at strangers so they buy more trinkets. I hesitated. Crowds. Cameras. Strangers with curious eyes. Then I looked at the plastic container in her hands. It was sweating warmth. Somewhere in my ribs, a knot loosened. Okay, I said. I can carry things. And smile. Let's aim for neutral. Sold. She grinned. Also, weird question. Do you know anything about payment systems? Mine takes 10 minutes to think every time someone taps their card, and I can feel customers aging in front of me. I can look, I said. She pointed 2 fingers at her eyes and then at me. No vanishing, she repeated, then stepped back into the hall. Saturday, 8. Wear that flannel. It makes you look trustworthy. When she left, the room felt bigger, like a lung that had remembered how to inflate. Saturday came with a pale sun and the smell of fry oil. Vendors erected tents that looked like bright, temporary promises. I carried tables, anchored tarps, tested power strips. June arranged candles, not one with googly eyes. A kid stopped to pet a wooden whale carving and told me very seriously that whales are just big, wet mountains. His mother apologized. I told her not to. The boy winked like we were in on something cosmic. I kept my head down. I smiled at the ground. I laughed when June said, "If anyone asks, this display is called organized chaos and it's a technique, not a cry for help." Around noon, while I was swapping a cable, a voice behind me said my name, not Miles. The old one. The one I'd been trying to sink in the harbor. Adrian. I went cold so fast my vision dimmed around the edges. The voice wasn't Tess's. It wasn't Alina's. It was thin with surprise, not accusation. I turned slowly. A tourist couple stood near the booth next door, maps in hand, sunscreen not rubbed in. The woman squinted, then shook her head. "Sorry," she said to her companion. "Thought you were someone I knew." They moved on, leaving shoe prints and a ringing in my ears. June looked up, read my face in a second, and slid a paper cup into my hand. "Water," she said. "Sip, don't drown." I nodded. The water tasted like pennies and grace. The rest of the day passed without incident, if you didn't count a wind gust that tried to marry our tent to a bakery sign. We sold 3 dozen candles and 5 picture frames and a mug that said "Be salty" to a woman who took herself too seriously for the mug but bought it anyway. When we packed up, June pressed cash into my hand. "You overpaid," I said. "I underpaid," she countered. "And the soup was good, right?" "It was." "Then don't argue." We loaded the last table into her truck. She closed the tailgate, hesitated, and then said, "Hey, Miles." "Yeah." "You don't have to tell me anything. You know that, right?" I forced my jaw to unclench. "I know." "Good." She flicked a crumb off her sleeve. "But if anything from your old life walks into this one and starts yelling, I'm a loud yeller back." She said it like a joke, but her eyes were steel. "Thanks," I said. It came out rougher than I intended. She saluted with 2 fingers and drove off. I watched her taillights until they disappeared, then walked the long way home. Dusk pulled a blanket over the harbor. The town exhaled. Back in my room, I set the cash on the table and stared at it like it could answer a question. On a blank page, I wrote, "Today, I was useful. Today, I was not a monster." Then, someone said my name, almost. How many chances does a lie get to find you? I closed the notebook and listened to the radiator hiss. Somewhere downstairs, Celia laughed at something on the radio. Out on the street, a car idled for a beat too long, then moved on. I couldn't tell if the sound was ordinary or a signal. I turned the light off and lay in the dark, counting the seconds between my breaths, willing my heart to slow. It did, eventually, but not before I realized I had made a mistake days ago. I had started to believe I could be only miles forever. That I could outrun a story that never needed my footsteps to begin with. Names are handles, yes. But lies don't need handles. They stick to skin. Somewhere far from the harbor, a phone buzzed with a fresh post, a thread, a tag. Somewhere closer, a camera clicked behind a windshield. And in the space between those sounds, I understood, disappearing isn't an ending. It's a pause. The world presses play when it wants. I slept anyway, because morning always asks for strength. And I would need it, for the next knock, the next lens, the next person who might say my old name and mean it. The market had left me with sore arms, a wad of cash, and a head buzzing louder than the crowd had been. All night, the tourist slip, calling me Adrian, echoed like a stone bouncing inside a hollow well. I tried to tell myself it was nothing. Just coincidence. Just someone mistaking me for another face. But deep down, I knew better. Lies have a way of traveling farther than truth ever could. The next morning, I forced myself into routine. Run before dawn. Work the nets until my hands stung. Coffee from Celia that tasted like burnt wood. A nod from Ben. But even in that rhythm, something was off. My pulse stayed high. Every car that slowed near the harbor set me on edge. It didn't help that June wouldn't stop poking at me with her bright, relentless curiosity. That afternoon, she cornered me outside her shop, arms folded. "You've got that look," she said. "What look?" I asked. "The one people get when they're waiting for the ground to open up and swallow them." I gave a tight smile. "Maybe I'm just tired." "Maybe," she said, but her eyes lingered. "Or maybe you're hiding from something." I froze, but she didn't press. Instead, she handed me a bag. Inside was bread, still warm. "Eat. Whatever you're running from, bread helps. Trust me." Her kindness hit harder than her words. I didn't deserve it, but I took the bread anyway. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat on the edge of my bed, notebook open on my knees. The sentence I wrote shook as much as my hands. "It's finding me." 2 days later, the car came back. Same shiny paint, same woman behind the wheel. She parked across from the harbor, phone in hand, pretending to scroll. Every time I moved, her eyes flicked up. I dropped the rope I was coiling and walked toward her. She startled, rolled her window down halfway. "Can I help you?" I asked. She smiled too quickly. "Just waiting for someone." "Who?" Her lips parted, then closed. "Doesn't matter." I leaned closer. "If you're taking pictures of me, stop." Her cheeks flushed. She shoved her phone into her bag, muttered something about mistaken identity, and drove off, tires spitting gravel. Ben, who had been pretending to fix a net 10 feet away, raised an eyebrow. "Friend of yours?" "No," I said too fast. "Then why's she staring like she knows you?" I didn't answer. That evening, June showed up at the inn with a laptop under her arm. "Emergency," she said. "My payment system died mid-sale and nearly started a riot." I fixed it. She poured coffee. And in the middle of her rambling about software updates, she stopped and looked at me. "Do you want to tell me your real name?" she asked softly. My heart thudded. She didn't push. Just sat there, eyes steady, waiting. And for the first time since I disappeared, I almost wanted to. But before I could speak, headlights swept across the window. The same car, idling at the corner, its silhouette framed against the dusk. The lie hadn't just followed me, it had found my new life. The car came back the next morning. Same spot. Same engine idling like a restless animal. I pretended not to see it while hauling nets, but every glance toward the harbor dragged my stomach lower. Ben noticed. Of course he did. The man missed nothing. He squinted toward the street and muttered, "That woman's got too much time on her hands. She'll get bored." I lied. But she didn't. She stayed until dusk, phone raised more than once. That night, I sat in my room with the lights off, notebook open. I wrote the same words over and over until the page blurred. It's not over. It's not over. It's not over. By the third day, June showed up at my door. She didn't knock gently, she banged like she owned the hinges. "Open up, Miles." I hesitated, then cracked the door. She stood there with fire in her eyes and 2 mugs of coffee in her hands. "You think I don't notice? You've been jumpy as a rabbit, and some creep in a shiny car has been lurking around. Spill." "I can handle it," I said. "Clearly," she snapped, pushing past me. She set the mugs on the table, planted her hands on her hips. "Look, I don't need the whole sob story. But if someone's after you, I need to know if I'm in the blast radius." Her words cut sharper than she knew. Blast radius. That was exactly what it felt like, living like a bomb waiting to go off. I rubbed my face, exhausted. "It's complicated." "Then uncomplicated," she said, softer this time. I sat down. My chest tightened. For months I'd carried silence like armor, but now it felt more like chains. "She lied," I whispered finally. "My wife's sister. Said I got her pregnant. And everyone believed her. My wife. Her family. The internet. Everyone." June's mouth parted, but she didn't speak. She just let the words sit between us. I lost my job. My home. Friends I thought I'd have forever. I left because staying meant being buried alive under a lie I couldn't fight. Her eyes softened. "And now it's found me." Silence stretched. The radiator hissed. Outside, a gull screamed like it had read my confession. Finally, June reached across the table and tapped her fingers on my notebook. "So write the truth. If the world wants a story, give them yours." I shook my head. "They don't want the truth. They want a villain." Her gaze didn't waver. "Then stop living like one." Before I could respond, headlights swept the window again. The car. Back, closer this time. June saw it too. She stood, fists clenched. "You stay here." She marched outside before I could stop her. Through the cracked door, I heard her voice rise sharp and fearless. "Hey, you've been circling for days. Who are you, and what do you want?" The woman's voice floated back, calm but cold. "Just making sure I found the right man." My blood iced. I stepped into the doorway, shadows swallowing me. Her eyes locked on mine across the distance. And she smiled. The kind of smile that promised the lie wasn't done with me yet. The woman didn't flinch when our eyes met. She leaned casually against the car, arms folded, as if she had all the time in the world. June, fiery and fearless, stood between us like a shield. "You've been stalking him," June said. "Say what you came to say, or leave." The woman tilted her head. "He knows why I'm here." Her words slid over me like oil, slick and suffocating. I stepped forward, heart pounding so hard it echoed in my ears. "No," I said, my voice rough. "I don't." Her smile widened. "Adrian, you're harder to track than I thought." Hearing my real name out loud in this quiet harbor town was like a gunshot. June whipped her head toward me, shock written across her face. "Adrian," she whispered. I swallowed hard. "Not here," I muttered, but the damage was already done. The woman finally straightened. "Your wife sent me." The ground seemed to shift under my feet. My throat dried. "What?" "She's been looking for you. 4 years. And now she's desperate." June crossed her arms, standing taller. "Desperate for what?" "To ruin him twice." The woman ignored her. She looked only at me. "She knows the truth now. About her sister. About the lie. And she wants you back." A laugh burst out of me, jagged and bitter. "Now? After she let them beat me? After she threw me out without a question?" "She was wrong," the woman said simply. "She wants to explain." June's eyes flicked between us, confusion mixing with anger. "Hold on. Let me get this straight. His wife believed some lie, destroyed his life, and now she's sending strangers to drag him back." "Not a stranger," the woman said softly. "I'm her friend. And I promised I'd find him." I shook my head, blood roaring in my ears. "Tell her she's too late. I buried that life." But the woman didn't budge. "She won't stop looking, Adrian. She says she won't rest until she sees you." For a moment, the harbor fell silent. Even the gulls seemed to hold their breath. June stepped closer to me, her voice low but firm. "You don't owe her anything." And she was right. But as I looked at the woman standing by her car, as I heard Tessa's ghost pressing through her words, I felt the old wound rip open. Maybe I didn't owe her. But part of me still wanted to know why. Why she never even asked me once. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in the dark with my notebook open, staring at the words I had already written. "You didn't even ask." Now, after all these years, she suddenly wanted to ask? To explain. The notebook trembled in my hands. I pressed the pen to the page and wrote in jagged strokes. "Why now?" By morning, June was waiting downstairs. She didn't say anything at first, just slid a cup of coffee across the table toward me. Finally, she broke the silence. "You're thinking about seeing her." I didn't answer. She leaned forward. "Adrian, Miles, whatever you want to call yourself, you built something here. Maybe small, maybe fragile, but real. Are you willing to rip it open again?" Her words settled heavy in my chest. Because she was right. I had rebuilt piece by piece, work, routine, a fragile piece. But it all felt like it was balancing on the edge of a blade. The stranger, the messenger, hadn't come back that morning, but her presence lingered like smoke. Tessa knew I was alive. Which meant the past wasn't just a memory anymore. It was hunting me. By noon, I found myself walking the shoreline, boots crunching against wet stones. My reflection wavered in the tide, half Adrian, half Miles, and neither one whole. I remembered the slap. The fists. The look in Tessa's eyes, not searching for truth, but burning with certainty. She hadn't given me the chance to speak. She had chosen the lie. And yet, a part of me still craved to hear her say it wasn't true. To admit she had been wrong. Ben caught me on the docks that evening, tightening ropes with his usual steady rhythm. "You look like a man deciding whether to jump ship," he said without glancing up. "Something like that," I muttered. He tied the knot, leaned back, and finally looked at me. Sometimes, the storm behind you ain't done. You either face it, or let it drown you slow. The words lodged in my chest. That night, the car came back again. But this time, the woman didn't just idle. She stepped out, walked straight to the inn, and slipped a note under my door. I unfolded it with shaking hands. She's waiting. Tomorrow. At the diner off Route 7. Noon. One chance to listen. After that, she'll stop searching. June read the note over my shoulder, her jaw tightening. Don't go, she said flatly. But as I stared at the words, my heart twisted. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about me. About whether I could keep running from a ghost that refused to stay buried. Because maybe facing Tessa wasn't about forgiving her. Maybe it was the only way to finally be free. The diner sat on the edge of the highway, a squat building with peeling paint and a flickering neon sign that buzzed like it was struggling to stay alive. Noon sun beat down on the cracked asphalt lot, and my chest felt just as brittle. I stood outside for a long time, staring at the door, half hoping I'd turn around and walk away. But my legs betrayed me. They carried me inside, straight into the smell of burnt coffee and fried onions. And there she was. Tessa. Her hair was shorter, her face thinner, shadows under her eyes. She looked older, but it wasn't just time, it was regret etched into her skin. She rose halfway from the booth, like she wasn't sure if she had the right to stand. Adrian. Her voice cracked. I froze. That name felt foreign and familiar all at once. She gestured to the seat across from her. My body moved before my mind caught up, and I slid into the booth. For a moment, we just stared at each other, the silence louder than the chatter around us. Finally, I broke it. Why now? Her lips trembled. Because I know the truth. About Alina. About everything. She admitted it. The words hit me like a wave, yet instead of relief, there was only anger. Admitted it. After years. After I lost my job, my friends, my name. Tessa's eyes filled with tears. I was blind. I was scared. She came to me crying, saying you'd stop. My voice was sharp enough to make her flinch. You didn't even ask me. Not once. You looked at me and saw a monster. Her tears spilled over. I know. And I've hated myself every day for it. I should have trusted you. I should have fought for you. Instead, I let her destroy us. The waitress appeared with 2 waters, setting them down without a word. Tessa wrapped her hands around hers like it was the only thing grounding her. I came to find you because I can't live with the weight anymore, she whispered. I don't want forgiveness, I just want you to know I was wrong. I stared at her, my chest tight. This was the moment I thought I wanted. The confession, the truth finally spoken aloud. But instead of release, I felt the years of silence pressing harder. You don't get to erase what you did with a single sentence, I said. You killed the man I was. You buried him without a question. Now you're sitting across from someone else entirely. She nodded slowly, tears dripping onto the table. I understand. I just needed to say it. Even if it changes nothing. I leaned back, the knot in my chest twisting tighter. For the first time, I realized she wasn't here to rebuild. She was here to confess. And me. I had to decide if I would let that confession shackle me again, or finally set me free. Outside, the car idled. Her friend, the messenger, was waiting, watching. My new life waited too, fragile but real, back at the harbor. I looked at Tessa one last time. And I knew my answer. I held her gaze for what felt like hours, though it couldn't have been more than a minute. Tessa's tears streaked down her face, her hands trembling as if she was clinging to the hope that I might still reach across the table. But I didn't. The truth was, I had wanted this moment for years. Her confession, her apology, her recognition of the lie that had destroyed me. I thought it would heal me. Instead, it only proved what I already knew. Nothing could bring back the life that had been stolen. You came all this way to tell me you were wrong, I said quietly. But what I needed, what I begged for without words back then, was for you to ask. Just once. You never did. And I can't go back to being the man you didn't trust. Her face crumpled. She reached out across the table, fingers stopping short of my hand. Adrian, please. I don't want you back for me. I just need you to know. I still love you. The words twisted the knife deeper. Love, she said. But love without trust is just another lie. I stood slowly, the chair scraping against the tile. You loved the version of me your sister described. The villain. The monster. The man you could hate. You buried me, Tessa. And now you're standing at my grave asking for forgiveness. I can't give it to you. Her shoulders shook. She covered her face with her hands, sobs muffled against her palms. For a moment, I almost reached out. Almost. But then I remembered the slap, the fists, the silence that followed. I remembered walking away barefoot, bruised, and alone. I turned toward the door. As I stepped outside, sunlight spilled across the lot, blinding and sharp. The messenger stood by the car, watching me carefully. She opened her mouth, but I raised a hand. Tell her she got her chance, I said. And tell her I'm not Adrian anymore. Without waiting for a reply, I walked down the road. Each step felt heavy and light at once, as if I was burying my old self deeper, while also shedding his ghost. By the time I reached the harbor that evening, the gulls were circling overhead, and the air smelled of salt and rope. Ben gave me a nod, nothing more. June caught my eyes, saw the storm in them, and didn't ask questions. She just pressed a loaf of bread into my hands and said, "You're home." For the first time, I believed her. Back in my room, I opened the notebook to the first page. You didn't even ask. I let my pen hover, then wrote beneath it in steady strokes. And I don't need you to anymore. I closed the book. The past would always be a shadow. But shadows fade when you step into the light. And I was finally ready to live in mine.